Welcome to Twilight Terror Stories. Twilight is not just the end of day, it's the beginning of something else. A time when the shadows stretch and fear takes its first breath. You've stepped into that moment now, and the stories are waiting. Let them find you. That brass lamp. Its acquisition marks the precise moment my nights fractured. Sleep, true restorative slumber, has become a forgotten country these past weeks. My own mind feels like thinning ice, threatening to give way. Or perhaps clarity is the real terror, the chill uncertainty that this is happening. A miasma of desiccated wood and forgotten histories clung to the air within the antique dealer's threshold, the sign proclaiming, "Final liquidation, all must be sold." A stark, unheeded omen. Shelves groaned under strata of cultural sediment, reaching towards a grimy ceiling. The proprietor, a skeletal man whose thick spectacles magnified anxious eyes, shadowed my perusal, his fingers nodding and unknodding, his gaze perpetually darting towards the exit like a trapped bird eager for flight and finality. Then, nestled between dog-eared quartos and a clock frozen mid-tick, it resided. No masterpiece, merely brass given the soft luster of countless touches, crowned by a shade the color of old parchment, seemingly original, aged but whole. Yet it beckoned with a silent insistence. "The price?" I inquired. "$25s," he practically spat, the sum tumbling out with indecent haste, a velocity bordering on desperation. A warning bell I failed to heed. His eyes skittered away as my money crossed his palm, refusing connection. Ignorance felt like bliss as I carried my prize home, placing its sentinel on my nightstand, an intended beacon against the mundane dark. For 2 nights, tranquility reigned. Its glow was a warm pool, perfect for navigating the final pages before sleep claimed me. A bargain well struck, I preened inwardly. Then, the 3rd night shattered the peace. 3 a.m., precise as a death knell, a rhythmic pulsing from the lamp. Illumination, darkness, illumination, darkness, illumination, darkness. 3 distinct cycles. My hand flew to the cord, finding only empty air. The plug lay inert beside the socket. A jolt, colder than the night air, shot through me. Logic scrambled for purchase. A phantom surge, residual energy trapped in the filament, somnolent hallucination. I forced the plug home, cycled the switch. Obediently, it lit, then extinguished. Nothing overtly amiss. Yet, the following night delivered an encore. 3 a.m., the unplugged trinity of flashes. Poised this time, phone camera ready, I aimed. Futile. The lens captured only mundane darkness. The instant I lowered the device, frustration simmering, the lamp performed its silent, triple blink. A distinct impression of derision settled in the room, heavy and unwelcome. Sleep became a shallow, treacherous thing. Each night devolved into a vigil, anticipating the 3 o'clock chime. Sometimes exhaustion would drag me under, only for the pulsing light to wrench me back. Sometimes I stared, dry-eyed, as the digital minutes crawled towards the appointed hour. The lamp, my unplugged tormentor, never missed its cue. A week into this siege, the phenomenon mutated. Drifting in that gray space between wakefulness and sleep, the familiar triad pulsed. As the 3rd extinction plunged the room into profound blackness, my gaze snagged on the far corner. a presence, denser than the ambient gloom, a silhouette vaguely anthropomorphic yet fundamentally discordant. Too attenuated, too gaunt, its very geometry felt like a violation of natural law. My hand spasmed, fumbling for the lamp's switch, nearly sending it crashing. Light exploded, scouring the shadows. The corner held nothing but my laundry hamper, draped with discarded clothes. A tremor took hold of my hands, a violent, uncontrollable shivering. The lamp burned until dawn. Daylight brought a frantic dissection. Wires traced, socket inspected, switch mechanism probed. Nothing anomalous. A visit to a weary electrician yielded only confirmation of its banality. A standard mid-century piece, utterly unremarkable, he pronounced. That evening, seeking distance, I exiled the lamp to the living room. At the ordained hour, 3 a.m., I was jolted awake not by the brass lamp, but by the ceiling fixture in my bedroom performing the trifold pulse, and the presence returned, now looming beside my closet door, elongated further, its apex grazing the ceiling plaster. No discernible features, just that aberrant outline against the murk. My fingers slapped the bedside light switch. The room stood empty. But this time, preceding the flood of light, a distinct susurrus reached my ears, the whisper of something gliding across the carpet. The following day saw me standing before the antique shop once more, lamp tucked under my arm. Futile. Darkened windows stared back, plastered with opaque paper. A stark notice adhered to the door, permanently shuttered. All sales final. No surprise, merely confirmation of a grim suspicion. The urge to hurl the lamp into the nearest dumpster warred with the chilling thought. What if this malevolence simply attached itself to the next unsuspecting soul? Or worse, what if it remained tethered to me, regardless of the object? Holding on to the lamp, perversely, offered a sliver of agency. I knew its schedule. I could prepare. Thus began the nightly ritual. Awake before 3, observing the spectral flashes, my hand perpetually hovering near the switch. The entity, emboldened, encroached. Night by night, its station advanced. Soon, it stood sentinel at the foot of my bed, its impossible physique resolved into sharper focus, not merely wrong, but grotesquely unviable. Limbs stretched to unnatural lengths, digits resembling skeletal twigs. Its head canted at an angle that spoke of shattered vertebrae. Driven by the oppressive silence, I began to address it, my voice a ragged whisper in the dark. What is your purpose? Why haunt me? Sometimes simply leave. The void offered no reply, only its unwavering, static presence, though occasionally a flicker at the edge of vision suggested infinitesimal movement, a parody of breath. The accumulated deficit of sleep began its insidious erosion of my awakened life. Micro-sleeps ambushed me at my desk. Peripheral flickers resolved into that familiar, dreaded silhouette in the sterile office light. Colleagues offered concerned glances, murmuring about my pallor, my haunted eyes. I deflected with flimsy narratives of insomnia, of stress, anything but the grotesque truth. One night, fueled by desperation, I resolved to capture definitive proof. Phone positioned, recording engaged, I forced wakefulness. 3 a.m. The lamp pulsed its signature rhythm, and there, starkly visible through the phone's enhanced low-light lens, stood the entity. a figure seemingly woven from absolute negation, impossibly tall. Triumph surged, immediately extinguished upon reviewing the footage. The recording showed only my vacant room, the lamp dutifully flashing in the gloom. Its passivity fractured shortly thereafter. Following the flashes one night, that chilling whisper of movement sounded again, unnervingly close. It stood beside my bed. A palpable cold emanated from it, a glacial aura chilling the air, stealing the warmth from my skin. My hand rested on the switch, yet paralysis gripped me, breath trapped in my lungs. It inclined itself towards me. No face registered, only that abyssal vacancy where features should reside, but the intensity of its regard was undeniable. The cold deepened, numbing my fingers on the switch. Then, contact, a touch upon my shoulder, long, frigid digits that felt less like pressure, on my skin and more like intrusion, through it, violating the boundary of my flesh. A primal scream tore from my throat as I slammed the switch. Light banished the presence, but the cold lingered on my shoulder, and beneath my pajama top, 5 precise linear welts burned crimson against my skin, like rulings drawn by an icy stylus. The next day was a blur of frantic acquisition. Lamps of every description, torches, battery-powered lanterns. My bedroom became a web of extension cords, a desperate constellation of potential light sources aimed at every conceivable shadow. Lunacy, perhaps, but preferable to the encroaching terror. That night, at the inexorable hour, the defense proved futile. Not just the brass lamp, but every illuminating device in the room, plugged in, battery-operated, even the dormant flashlight on my phone, pulsed thrice in uncanny synchrony. As darkness reclaimed the space, I saw it was no longer alone. An entity occupied each corner, each a variation on the theme of tallness and aberration, each unique distortion turned towards my bed. Immobilized, I watched as the glacial cold intensified, misting my breath in the air. The figures began to converge, gliding with that unnerving smoothness across the floor, their impossible forms closing the distance. The original presence, the one born of the lamp, reached me first. Its arm elongated, stretching impossibly, fingers unfurling like the petals of some necrotic bloom. That invasive cold brushed my cheek. In that instant, something fractured within me. A surge of pure, primal revulsion propelled me into action. Seizing the brass lamp, I hurled it with all my strength against the far wall. It struck with the sickening clang and shower of fragmented metal. The bulb imploded with a sharp pop. Simultaneously, the figures dissolved. The oppressive cold evaporated. My room, violated but blessedly empty, settled around me, wreckage strewn across the floor. The remainder of the night was dedicated to meticulous eradication, gathering every shard of brass, every sliver of glass, nicking my fingers repeatedly in the process. The small pains irrelevant, I wrapped the remnants carefully. A paranoid pilgrimage followed, depositing the bagged fragments into separate refuse bins across the city. Excessive, yes, but caution felt insufficient. That was 3 days ago. The spectral light show has ceased. The apparitions have not returned. Yet the tyranny of 3:01 a.m. remains unbroken. I wake each night, slick with sweat, heart hammering, and sometimes, drifting on the edge of consciousness, a phantom chill traces the line of my shoulder. Last night, cruising past the site of the now-defunct antique dealership, I saw the windows were clean, the shuttered look replaced by the bright promise of new commerce. Then my blood turned to ice water. There, positioned prominently in the nascent display of the incoming business, sat its twin, a brass table lamp identical down to the parchment-hued shade. A sickening certainty clamped down on me. Tomorrow I return, not from desire, but from a dreadful obligation, to acquire it before another soul falls prey. Is this its end game? Was I selected for this very purpose? Or perhaps the thinning ice of my sanity has finally cracked. Perhaps tomorrow I will enter that shop and find only an innocuous object, a figment of my fractured psyche. Unlikely, terribly unlikely, for even now, as these words form under my pen, the clock reads 2:59 a.m. Even now, with no cursed lamp present, the air in my room grows sharp, acquires a distinct chill. 3 minutes remain until the silence either confirms my freedom or announces the persistence of the haunting. 3 minutes to know if shattering the vessel truly banished the occupant. 2 minutes now. 1. The overhead light begins to flutter. The day we claimed our haven on Hawthorne Lane, nestled amongst maples turning gold, the thought of sharing it with the echoes of past agonies never crossed my mind. I am Alara. My husband, Liam, and I had hunted for sanctuary, a place for our children to root themselves, and this grand old Victorian seemed a whispered promise fulfilled. Its rooms breathed space, the garden sprawled with untamed generosity, and the price felt like a secret gifted just to us. Such elation blinded us, perhaps intentionally, to the clipped tones of the agent mentioning the prior occupant's abrupt vacancy. Weeks unfurled in a haze of paint fumes and the satisfying heft of furniture finding its place. Clara and Finn, our children, echoed our joy, their laughter decorating the vast rooms, their explorations charting the territory of the backyard treehouse. It felt foundational, this house, permanent. Then the dissonant notes began. Subtle intrusions at first, a bedroom door clicking shut in a draftless hall, keys migrating from the hook where they were hung. We'd chuckle, blaming settling floorboards, our own forgetfulness. Old houses have their eccentricities, we told ourselves. But nearly a month in, the eccentricities sharpened their teeth. I stood at the kitchen counter, lost in the rhythm of chopping vegetables for dinner, when the floorboards overhead groaned, not with age, but with intention. Heavy, measured footfalls pacing the upstairs corridor. "Liam," I called, expecting his early return. Silence answered, thick and watchful. A knot tightened in my stomach as I ascended the stairs, each tread amplifying the unease. The second floor lay still, doors shut like closed eyelids. Yet, as I paused on the landing, adrift in confusion, a giggle, undeniably a child's, bright and sharp, skittered from just behind me. I spun, heart leaping, expecting Clara or Finn playing tricks. The hallway stretched empty, dust motes dancing in the afternoon light. That evening, relaying the incident to Liam, I saw a flicker of concern in his eyes before he smoothed it over. "It's just the house settling, Alara. Old timbers, weird acoustics." His reassurances became flimsy barricades against the mounting tide. Clara began complaining of whispers, thin as spider silk, breathing her name when she played alone. Finn's meticulously ordered toy soldiers would greet us in the mornings, rearranged into bizarre, unsettling tableaus. And I became accustomed to fleeting movements in my peripheral vision, phantom shapes dissolving the instant I tried to focus on them. The storm broke, literally and figuratively, 2 months after our arrival. A concussive clap of thunder jolted me from a restless sleep. In the subsequent flash of lightning that bleached the room stark white, I saw her. A figure stood sentinel at the foot of our bed. A woman, her face sculpted by deprivation, cheekbones stark, eyes vast, vacant pools absorbing the flickering light. She stared directly at me. A scream tore from my throat, jolting Liam awake. He fumbled for the lamp, flooding the room with yellow light. She was gone. Trembling, we rushed to check the children. Clara sat bolt upright, tear tracks glistening on her cheeks. "The crying lady was here," she whispered, her small voice thin with fear. "She told me we have to go, before they come back." That fractured whisper snapped the last thread of denial. The following morning, fueled by adrenaline and dread, we plunged into the house's history. The findings coiled icily in our stomachs. The Ashtons, the family before us, hadn't merely moved. They had vanished 3 years prior, leaving behind cooling coffee cups and unmade beds. An investigation stalled, choked by whispers of the family's escalating anxieties, strange happenings within these very walls. Further excavation revealed a sickening pattern stretching back a century. Families fleeing abruptly, plagued by sudden tragedies, inexplicable accidents, disappearances, swift, devastating illnesses. This house wasn't just wood and plaster. It was a vessel for misfortune. We were grappling with the enormity of this, the impossible choices looming, when Finn burst into the living room, his eyes alight with an unnerving excitement. "I've found new friends," he declared. "They live inside the walls. They want to play hide and seek." A glacial chill traced my spine. "Finn, darling, what do you mean they live in the walls?" He pointed towards a small, unassuming ventilation grill near the floorboards, one I'd barely registered before. "They come out of there. They look funny, but they're nice. They said they waited a long, long time for someone to play with." Liam and I exchanged a look heavy with unspoken fear. That night, cocooned in the deceptive quiet after the children slept, we approached the vent, armed with flashlights and a suffocating sense of trespass. Liam carefully worked the screws loose, revealing a pocket of darkness beyond. He angled the flashlight beam into the aperture. We both recoiled. A narrow crawl space snaked away into the foundations. "Do we dare?" My voice was a tremor, fear warring with a desperate need to understand. Liam's jaw was set. "We have to know what we're living with." He went first, contorting himself into the oppressive tightness. I followed, my heartbeat a frantic drum against my ribs, certain its thunder would alert whatever lurked within. The passage twisted, burrowing deeper into the house's secret anatomy. The air grew thick, stale, carrying faint, sibilant whispers that seemed to emanate from the very plaster around us. Finally, the tunnel widened into a small, hidden chamber. As our flashlight beams swept across the space, a choked gasp escaped me. The walls were a canvas of crude, frantic drawings, childlike figures with mouths stretched in silent screams, shadowed entities looming over them. In the room's center lay a chilling collection. Tarnished toys, a woman's locket, a man's wallet, remnants of lives swallowed by this place. But it was the fresh crayon drawn tacked prominently to one wall that turned my blood to ice. It depicted our family, Liam, me, Clara, Finn, encircled by crudely drawn smiling stick figures. Beneath it, scrawled in a child's unsteady hand, "New friends, play forever." We scrambled back through the suffocating passage, propelled by sheer terror, our minds fractured. What now? Flee? But who would possibly believe such a tale? As we emerged, coated in dust and trembling, we found Clara and Finn standing unnervingly still in the hallway, their eyes wide, pupils dilated, strangely unfocused. "They're coming," Clara stated, her voice unnaturally placid. "They want us to join their game." Instantly, the house erupted. A cacophony of banging reverberated from within the walls, frantic scratching scrabbled from the vents, and a chorus of whispers swelled, a multi-voiced susurrus seeming to pour from the air itself. There was no thought of packing, only escape. Snatching the children, we bolted for the car, the pandemonium chasing us, clinging to us. As we tore down the driveway, tires spitting gravel, I risked a backward glance. Every window framed faces, dozens of them, pale and indistinct, pressed against the glass, watching our flight. We drove through the starless night, putting miles, then states, between us and Hawthorne Lane. We abandoned everything, possessions, careers, the life we'd envisioned. But we had each other. We were breathing. That was the only currency that mattered. A year has passed. We inhabit a new town, a new house, aggressively modern, blessedly devoid of history or hidden apertures. Yet sleep offers only fleeting respite. Sometimes, in the deepest hours, I wake convinced I hear whispers sighing from the heating ducts, glimpse shadows coalescing just beyond my sightline. We never contacted the authorities. The story felt too monstrous, too unbelievable. But the house on Hawthorne Lane haunts my thoughts. It stands, patient, waiting. I think of the Ashtons and all the others woven into its dark tapestry. Are they still within those walls, eternal captives seeking fresh companions for their endless game? I know now that some structures are more than inert matter. Some possess a sentience, a hunger that deepens with time. The true horror isn't always monstrous forms, but the invitations we unknowingly accept, believing we are the masters of our domain, when in fact we are merely the next course. So, should you find yourself drawn to a place that whispers perfection, idyllic setting, impossible price, a past shrouded in convenient vagueness, pause. Listen intently to the silence between floorboards. Observe the way light falls and the shapes shadows take. Because the entity you invite across the threshold might not be benign. And if the whispers start, if the periphery dances with unseen movement, do not rationalize. Do not dismiss. Sometimes the only sane act is to flee, leaving everything but your life, your family, your soul behind. We were fortunate. We tore ourselves free before the house fully digested us. But I often picture the next family, hopeful and unsuspecting, turning the key in the lock of that house on Hawthorne Lane. Will they hear the murmurs? Will they perceive the fleeting shapes? Or will they, too, eventually join the silent congregation at the windows, their faces pressed against the glass, watching, waiting for new friends to come and play forever within the walls? The spectral buzz of the overhead tubes filled the hollow space of the laundromat, a thin counterpoint to the daytime roar of churning machines. Solitude had always been my companion on these graveyard shifts, a welcome hush. But tonight, folding the final stack of synthetic-smelling linens, an electric shiver traced my spine, whispering that the quiet was a lie. I was not alone. This unremarkable Tuesday night was poised on the precipice, ready to plummet into an abyss that would irrevocably alter the landscape of my existence. My name is Ilara. For half a year, the ebb and flow of washers and dryers at the all-night spin cycle had dictated my nocturnal rhythm, a necessary evil funding the final stretch of my studies. Most nights unfolded predictably. Me, the metallic pulse of the machines, perhaps a lone soul seeking clean clothes under the cloak of insomnia. This particular night began no differently. 11 p.m. saw me punch the clock, exchange a tired nod with the departing evening attendant, and commence the familiar ritual, inspecting coin slots, replenishing powder in the clunky dispenser, stealing moments for textbooks between loads. Around the first hour past midnight, my gaze snagged on him. A figure rooted across the asphalt expanse, watching. Initially, I dismissed it. This street, though far from vibrant, occasionally hosted late-night wanderers. Yet his stillness was unnerving, a focused immobility that prickled my awareness. I forced my attention back to the lint traps, the monotonous sorting, but peripheral vision betrayed me. Each glance confirmed his vigil. No cigarette glow, no restless shifting, just an unwavering stare aimed squarely at the glass facade. At me. By 2 a.m., unease had curdled into a knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. The cheap plastic blinds were drawn, offering flimsy concealment, but his presence felt palpable, a pressure against the glass. Calling the authorities seemed futile, melodramatic. A man is standing outside. What crime was that? Paranoia, they'd think. Then, at 3, a sound shattered the artificial calm. Soft, insistent rapping on the front door's window pane. My heart slammed against my ribs. Turning, slow as syrup, I prayed it was wind, a stray branch. But he was there. Face pressed close, eyes wide, disturbingly vacant. "We're closed," I managed, striving for a firmness my voice lacked. "Try again after sunrise." He offered no reply, no flicker of movement, only that relentless gaze. Tremors began in my hands as I fumbled for my phone, the emergency number a beacon. It was then his voice seeped through the glass, muffled yet sharp with menace. "Let me in, Ilara. A brief conversation is all I desire." A glacial cold permeated my blood. "Ilara." "How?" "I'm dialing 911, I declared, my thumb hovering over the screen. His expression remained unchanged, a placid mask, but his subsequent words were shackles. "Unwise, Ilara, very unwise, especially considering your mother rests so peacefully over at Willow Creek Manor." My breath hitched. Willow Creek? The specifics were terrifyingly accurate. "What is it you want?" The question emerged as a pathetic quaver. "I told you. Talk. Just open the door, Ilara." Every nerve ending screamed refusal, a primal urge to flee, hide, anything but obey. Yet the veiled threat, sharp and precise, targeting the one vulnerability I couldn't shield, overrode all instinct. With hands that shook violently, I twisted the lock. He materialized inside like smoke, movements unnervingly fluid, possessing a strange predatory grace. Closer now, I saw the lines etched around his eyes, the salt dust in his dark hair, perhaps 50 years old. His eyes, though, seemed ageless, piercing. "See? Painless," he murmured, the sound smooth, almost hypnotic. "Shall we find somewhere to sit?" Retreating instinctively, my hip collided with a folding station. "Who are you? What is this?" A smile touched his lips but failed to ignite any warmth in his eyes. "My identity is irrelevant. My wants, they're somewhat more intricate." What followed was an hour suspended in surreal terror. He spoke of my life, weaving a narrative of my past, my high school mascot, the name of the boy who gave me my first kiss, the precise location of the scar from a childhood fall from an oak tree. He knew things whispered only in memory, details buried under years. Each revelation tightened the vice of fear. This was no random encounter. This man had observed, cataloged, dissected my existence from afar. Why? The word tore from my throat. Why me? In the stark, fluorescent glare, his eyes seemed to possess their own luminescence. Because you are singular, Ilara. You possess something I require. Before the question of what could form, he moved, blurring across the small space with startling speed. His hand clamped onto my arm, a sudden, sharp sting, and the laundromat began to warp, colors bleeding at the edges, sounds elongating into groans. "Resist nothing," his voice echoed, distant, distorted. "It will pass quickly." Consciousness returned in fragments, surfacing into oppressive darkness and a throbbing skull. As shapes slowly coalesced, the damp, musty scent of earth and decay filled my nostrils. Water dripped rhythmically nearby. Panic surged as I tested my limbs, finding wrists and ankles tightly bound. Cold concrete pressed against my cheek, struggling only scraped skin raw. Ah, awake at last. The voice emerged from the Stygian gloom, making me flinch violently. "Excellent. We may commence." "Commence what?" My voice was a dry rasp. "What do you want?" He stepped into a sliver of ambiguous light filtering from somewhere above, something metallic gleaming dully in his hand. A blade. "As I stated, Ilara, you hold something necessary, something quite extraordinary." He advanced, and I recoiled from the change in his eyes. No longer just cold, they held an unsettling inner radiance, a faint, unnatural glow. This wasn't real. A nightmare, surely. The searing line of pain as the knife bit into my forearm screamed otherwise. "Your blood, Ilara. It resonates differently. Unique. It is the key to my ascension." A scream ripped through me, swallowed by the stone walls. Yet, even through the terror and agony, a defiant spark ignited. Years navigating sketchy city corners after dark hadn't been for nothing. I wouldn't perish in this subterranean crypt. As he leaned closer, momentarily engrossed by the crimson welling from the wound, I saw my opening. With every ounce of strength, I snapped my head upward, connecting solidly with his face. He staggered back, a choke curse escaping him, the knife skittering across the floor. Ignoring the fire in my arm, I writhed, twisting until my bound hands closed awkwardly around the cool metal handle. It was clumsy, agonizing work, but the rope fibers began to yield. By the time his disorientation cleared, my wrists were free, the knife clutched tight. "You cannot comprehend," he snarled, blood streaming from his shattered nose, his voice thick with rage. "This is inevitable. It has begun." I wasted no time on his cryptic pronouncements. I lunged, swiping wildly with the blade, tearing fabric and flesh across his chest. He roared, less in pain than fury, and tackled me. We grappled, a desperate tangle on the frigid floor. His strength was considerable, but desperation lent me power. In the chaotic struggle, the knife found purchase, sinking deep into his shoulder. He recoiled, his expression one of startled disbelief more than agony. And then I saw it. His blood. It wasn't red. It was a sluggish, oily black, seeming to writhe with a vile life of its own. Seizing his moment of shock, I scrambled towards a set of rough-hewn stairs I'd glimpsed earlier. I ascended them, 2 at a time, the frantic drumming of my heart deafening. Behind me, heavy footfalls echoed his recovery, his pursuit. I burst through a door into what appeared to be a derelict house, shattered windows framing slivers of moonlight. Without hesitation, I flung myself towards the front entrance, praying it wasn't barred. The cool night air struck my face like a physical blow as I stumbled onto an overgrown patch of weeds. Directionless, yet drawn towards distant pinpricks of light. Civilization. Sanctuary. I ran. Faster than I knew I could, bare feet pounding indifferent pavement, ignoring the sharp protests of gravel and glass. No backward glances, no pause for breath until the fluorescent oasis of a gas station materialized. The attendant's eyes widened in shock as I crashed through the door, smeared with blood, hair wild, gasping. "Police!" I choked out. "Call them, please." The aftermath was a disorienting whirlwind. Detached police officers, antiseptic hospital corridors, questions I lacked the words or the sanity to adequately answer. They located the abandoned house, confirmed the existence of the basement, finding bizarre apparatus, jars filled with that viscous, dark fluid I fought not to visualize. They called me lucky, a survivor of a predator they labeled a serial killer targeting women like me. But their reports contained no mention of obsidian blood, no glowing eyes. They saw a madman. I knew I had encountered something far stranger, far older. The spin cycle is a memory I actively suppress. I relocated, sought anonymity in a new city. Yet the conviction remains, a cold certainty settling deep in my bones. It isn't finished. Whatever nascent transformation I interrupted, persists. Waiting, watching. Vigilance is my new shadow. Self-defense classes, fortified locks, hyper-awareness, these are my armor. Above all, I've learned to heed that internal alarm, that electric shiver down the spine, because sometimes the whisper of paranoia is the voice of truth, warning that the monsters lurking just beyond the lot are terrifyingly real. And should our paths cross again, I will be prepared. It was barely a week ago, perhaps less, when the television materialized in my life. Found is too gentle a word. Unearthed, maybe, from the basement's sepulchral silence, draped in the gray velvet of accumulated dust and laced with the brittle filigree of cobwebs. a relic I should have abandoned to its subterranean slumber. But curiosity, that insidious worm, burrowed deep. Now, sleep evades me, sustenance holds no appeal, and the darkness behind my eyelids replays only the phosphorescent glow of that screen, projecting the shape of what hunts me. The house itself whispered promises of sanctuary when I first crossed its threshold. 3 bedrooms bathed in the pale afternoon light, 2 baths, a yard hinting at forgotten green. The price, a consequence of foreclosure, sealed the bargain. The previous occupants simply evaporated, the realtor had murmured, leaving behind echoes and possessions. Their forfeiture, my fortune. Or, so I believed, signing the deed not 14 days past. That initial evening, tracing the damp concrete floor of the basement with my flashlight's beam, planning the geography of a future workshop, the light snagged on something tucked away in the deepest recess. A glass face, a cabinet of faux wood veneer peeling like sunburnt skin, twin antennae raised like skeletal fingers pointing toward some unseen signal. A cathode ray tube television, vintage and possibly heavy, a dead-weight anchor chained to a forgotten decade. Before condemning it to the landfill, a whim. See if the old beast still breathed. 20 minutes of wrestling dust and grime, locating a functioning outlet, and then the press of a button. Against all expectation, life flickered within. A hiss of snowstorm static, a wavering bloom of light coalescing into an image. Recognition struck cold. The basement. This basement. Yet, subtly wrong. The concrete expanse, the sturdy support columns, the washing machine sentinel against the far wall, all present but viewed from an impossible vantage, high in a corner, as if through the eye of some hidden watcher. The washing machine itself was an older ghost, a precursor to the one humming faintly nearby, and burned into the lower corner, a timestamp, 06/14/1994, 3:47 a.m. The image possessed the spectral pallor of aged surveillance footage. For long minutes, stillness reigned on screen. Then, a tremor in the chiaroscuro behind the phantom washer. A hand emerged, skeletal, the skin a pale, taut membrane over delicate bones. An arm followed, unnaturally slender, then a shoulder, a head. The entity unfolded itself into the weak light. It moved quadrupedally, yet, unlike any terrestrial creature, its limbs articulated with a sickening geometry, bending where no joint should be. Its head rotated fully, impossibly, keeping its face perpetually oriented towards the unseen lens as it scuttled forward. The face, dear God. A smooth, featureless expanse where eyes should have been. A mouth stretched into an inhuman crescent, revealing rows of needle-fine dentition. It crawled, deliberate and silent, towards the basement stairs and ascended. The feed abruptly switched perspective. The living room, timestamp unchanged. Through the Stygian gloom of the house, the figure drifted, a pale navigator charting the empty spaces, pausing at each doorway, hunting. My fingers fumbled for the power switch, pressed it. Nothing. I tore the plug from the wall socket. The image remained, unwavering, trapped within the glass. The creature completed its ground floor reconnaissance and flowed upwards. Another jarring cut. A bedroom. 2 figures lay entwined in sleep. The entity paused in the doorway, observing them, its head canted at an angle that defied anatomy. And then, the skin around its mouth crinkled. It smiled. A surge of primal revulsion propelled me. I seized the television, its unexpected weight a final insult, and hurled it against the concrete floor. The screen fractured, a spider web of cracks erupting across the glass, yet the picture held. Through the shattered vitrine, the creature turned its eyeless face towards the camera, towards me. Its maw gaped, stretching wider, wider, swallowing the frame until only blackness remained, an abrupt severance. Upstairs, behind the flimsy barricade of my bedroom door, I waited out the night, adrenaline my only companion. Dawn brought a fragile courage. I descended. The television was gone. Only broken shards glittered on the dusty floor like malevolent frost, but its absence offered no relief. Now, peripheral flickers dance at the edge of my sight. A dry, insistent scrabbling echoes within the walls when silence falls, and sometimes, caught in the reflective surfaces of mirrors or windows, I perceive a fleeting presence just behind my shoulder. Something pallid, something smiling. Last night, sorting through the detritus left by the vanished, I found them. Brittle newspaper clippings. June 15th, 1994. Local couple disappears without a trace. The names match the deed, the previous owners, and before them, another vanishing, and before them. The scrabbling from below grows insistent, louder now, punctuated by a distinct rhythmic thud ascending the basement stairs. Each step measured, testing the wood. I know what climbs towards me. I know the inevitable conclusion scripted for this house, for its inhabitants. Yet escape feels impossible, a path blocked by an unseen force. The lights just died, plunging the house into absolute darkness. My phone, a useless brick. I hear it now, just outside the door, a slow, deliberate testing of the barrier. The doorknob begins its slow rotation. A sliver of deeper darkness manifests beneath the door, its shadow. I can almost hear the stretch of that smile in the pregnant silence. It has arrived. Forgive me. This was written in haste, under duress. An instruction whispered from the shadows. Warn the others. This thing, the presence from the screen. It propagates through the telling. A narrative contagion. Awareness is invitation. My recounting this seals not only my fate, but potentially yours. A dreadful mistake. Too late now. Don't investigate the deep shadows in your own rooms. Resist the urge to glance over your shoulder. Whatever you hear, whatever you sense, don't turn around. It's already there. A skeleton key, filigreed with rust, turned the tumblers with a grating sigh. Pushing inward against the protesting weight of ancient oak, I breached the threshold of Ashworth Grange, utterly oblivious that I was crossing into a labyrinthine enigma poised to devour my sanity and threaten my very existence. Old houses, with their whispered histories and spectral memories embedded in plaster and wood, had always held me captive. Thus, encountering the advertisement for this sprawling, derelict Victorian edifice brooding on the town's periphery, abandoned, shunned for decades, proved an irresistible lure. The asking price felt suspiciously low, a bargain bordering on absurdity, and the estate agent's haste to finalize the transaction hummed with an unsettling eagerness. Warnings flickered at the edge of my perception, yet the intoxicating thrill of acquisition eclipsed all caution. Within, the house was a dilapidated majesty. Ceilings soared towards shadowed cornices, elaborate carvings adorned every architrave, and a magnificent staircase coiled upwards like the spine of some slumbering beast. Neglect lay thick as velvet dust. Yes, the task of restoration formidable. But beneath the decay pulsed a resonant beauty, a potential I yearned to resurrect. That inaugural day dissolved in exploration, architectural visions dancing in my mind. It was only upon ascending to the attic, a repository of temporal debris, that the ordinary fractured. Amidst shrouded furniture and forgotten crates, standard attic clutter, my gaze snagged on an anomaly. A door. Diminutive, perhaps 4 feet in height, it seemed incongruously inserted into the canted attic wall. Impelled by curiosity, I grasped the handle. Locked. I resolved to query the agent about this peculiarity later. As I pivoted to depart, a fugitive gleam, metal beneath the sagging bulk of a steamer trunk, arrested my movement. Displacing the trunk revealed a small key, intricately wrought, veiled in the patina of years. A whim guided my hand. I inserted it into the miniature door's lock. Astonishingly, it turned smoothly. The door groaned open, unveiling a cramped, lightless chamber beyond. My phone's beam sliced through the darkness, illuminating a sight that seized the air in my lungs. The walls, plastered floor to ceiling with photographs, hundreds, possibly thousands, their surfaces jaundiced by time, edges curling like ancient scrolls. They depicted people, men, women, children, captured in myriad poses, diverse settings. Yet, an intrinsic wrongness permeated the images, expressions rigidified into masks, eyes vacant, reflecting nothing, and woven into the fabric of every single frame, a detail easily missed yet starkly present once perceived, a tenebrous figure haunting the periphery. Drawing nearer, I scrutinized the portraits. The shadowy presence persisted, sometimes a mere suggestion of form, other times rendered with chilling clarity. A tall, attenuated shape possessing unnaturally elongated limbs. In certain photographs, it appeared to extend towards the subjects, its fingers stretched, talon-like. An icy current traced my spine. Surely this was an elaborate fabrication, some former occupant's macabre artistic endeavor. Yet, as my inspection continued, a dawning, sickening recognition surfaced. The backgrounds in the more recent semen images were familiar locales: the town common, the archaic library facade, the very street stretching before Ashworth Grange itself. So immersed was I in this gallery of the unsettling that the soft click of the main attic door closing behind me went unnoticed. Only when I turned, intending to retreat, did the cold realization strike. I was entombed. Panic flared, a frantic drumming against the heavy wood, my calls for aid swallowed by the house's vast emptiness. Time stretched, distorted into an agonizing elasticity before the door abruptly swung inward. I stumbled out, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The attic remained precisely as I'd left it, yet palpably altered. The air possessed a denser quality, a suffocating weight, and the inescapable conviction of being observed prickled my skin. I fled the upper floors, desperately attempting to rationalize the incident as accidental self-confinement, though a deeper instinct screamed otherwise. In the ensuing weeks, amidst the clamor of renovation, the strangeness intensified, weaving itself into the fabric of my days. I would awaken to find furniture subtly repositioned. Doors I distinctly recalled securing now standing ajar. Fleeting movements danced at the edges of my vision, dissolving into nothingness the moment I turned. Most disturbing, however, were the photographs. New images materialized within the hidden room, images I knew with absolute certainty had not been there previously. They were pictures of me asleep in my bed, me measuring a wall for plasterboard, me walking along the pavement outside, and always that shadowed entity, the silent gaze, as the local lore would later name it, lurked nearby, incrementally closer in each successive frame. An obsession took root. To excavate the truth buried within the house's foundations and the cryptic photographs. Countless hours were consumed in the hushed confines of the local archives, sifting through brittle newspaper clippings and municipal records. The discoveries unearthed sent tremors of cold through my soul. Ashworth Grange possessed a history steeped in darkness. Throughout the decades, numerous inhabitants had vanished without explanation, their disappearances conveniently attributed to sudden departures or flights to new beginnings. But the pattern was undeniable. The figure in the photographs resonated chillingly with fragmented descriptions found in regional folklore, tales of an entity known as the Silent Gaze, a being said to stalk its chosen prey, drawing sustenance from their escalating terror before ultimately claiming them. The narrative forming in my mind sounded like delusion, I knew. Confiding in anyone would invite diagnoses of madness. Yet the evidence was irrefutable, visceral. The silent gaze was terrifyingly real, and its focus was now fixed upon me. Escape attempts proved futile. My car would inexplicably fail. Sudden, violent storms would render the roads impassable. It felt as though the Grange itself conspired to hold me captive within its decaying embrace. Then arrived the night that fractured my resolve. I awoke abruptly to the distinct click-whir of a camera shutter, an old film camera I'd unearthed in the attic, one I'd intended to discard. Through the gloom, I perceived it suspended in midair, lens slowly pivoting towards me. Behind it, a barely discernible silhouette coalesced, the elongated form from the photographs. A raw scream tore from my throat as I scrambled from the bed, bolting myself inside the bathroom. I remained huddled there until the gray light of dawn filtered through the frosted glass, body racked with tremors, tears tracing cold paths down my face. Summoning a fragile courage, I emerged. Laid upon my bed was a freshly developed photograph. It showed me asleep, vulnerable. The silent gaze's hand, skeletal and reaching, hovered inches from my face, closer than it had ever appeared before. Time, I understood with chilling finality, was evaporating. I had to confront this presence, shatter its dominion over the house and my life. My research had yielded fragmented whispers of a counter-ritual, a method purported to banish the silent gaze. It was fraught with peril, its efficacy uncertain, but alternatives had dwindled to none. The following week became a blur of preparation, gathering arcane components, inscribing symbols onto the attic floorboards, fortifying my fraying nerves. On the night the full moon cast spectral patterns through the dormer windows, I stood within the circle I had drawn, candlelight flickering around me. The small door to the hidden room gaped open. the countless eyes in the photograph seeming to fix upon me with cold, malevolent awareness. As the archaic syllables of the ritual tumbled from my lips, words belonging to a tongue unknown yet resonant, the house itself seemed to awaken. Wind shrieked through unseen corridors, doors slammed violently, and susurrant voices whispered from within the very walls. The silent gaze materialized, more substantial, more defined than ever before. Its face remained a featureless void, its arms extended towards me, those dreadful, elongated fingers seeking purchase. Primal instinct screamed for flight, for surrender. Yet I anchored myself, forcing my gaze to meet the void. I was the final bulwark. Failure meant condemning unknown future occupants to this same insidious fate. Just as its chilling aura threatened to extinguish my resolve, as the cold it radiated seeped into my bones, a blinding incandescence erupted. The entity emitted a shriek, an unearthly sound that reverberated through my skull, and then, abruptly, it vanished. Silence descended upon Ashworth Grange. The cloying, oppressive atmosphere dissipated, replaced by an unfamiliar tranquility, a peace I hadn't experienced since first crossing its threshold. Within the small room, the photographs, loosed from their spectral preservation, began to decay, crumbling into fine gray dust. To claim that ordeal concluded cleanly, that life simply resumed its prior course, would be a falsehood. An encounter of that magnitude irrevocably alters one's landscape. I remain in Ashworth Grange. The thought of another soul inheriting its shadowed legacy unaware is unbearable. It has become, in its own way, a sanctuary, a haven for those whose experiences brush against the inexplicable. Occasionally, in the deepest hours of the night, a fleeting shadow might flicker at the periphery of my sight, but fear no longer holds dominion. I confronted the darkness dwelling within these walls and emerged, scarred yet whole. Whatever entities linger in the shadowed corners of old houses and secreted rooms, I stand prepared. The silent gaze, paradoxically, imparted a crucial lesson. The world holds more strangeness, more peril than we readily admit, yet resilience resides within us, often untapped. Sometimes, banishing our deepest fears requires only the courage to stand firm, to meet the monstrous gaze head-on. As for the camera, the catalyst for this harrowing journey, it rests upon my mantelpiece, a tangible reminder of the horrors endured and the strength discovered. It remains not as an icon of fear, but as a testament. Proof that the most profound terrors can be captured, held, and ultimately, through defiance and will, brought forth from shadow into redeeming light. A thumb, stark white against the encroaching gloom, hooked itself out of the roadside murk. Instinct screamed, "Accelerate!" But the road was a ribbon of hypnotic black. Fatigue had woven itself into my bones, and solitude gnawed like a rat in the walls of the cab. A perilous alchemy, that. I eased off the accelerator, the beam of my headlights spearing the night to illuminate a shape that would forever stalk the shadowed corridors of my memory. Silas, that's me. 19 years hauling steel and sundries across asphalt veins. You think the highway shows you everything, strips the world bare? It doesn't. Not until that pilgrimage down the fractured spine of Route 66. 14 hours bled into 15, the rig humming a tune of exhaustion. Static whispered dead secrets from the radio. My thermos, like my resolve, held only dregs. The painted lines writhed, hypnotic serpents under the high beams. Then the thumb, a pale flag of surrender or solicitation. A flicker in the side mirror snared my gaze, his unnervingly direct. A tremor ran beneath my skin, a cold premonition. But weariness is a persuasive devil. The air brakes hissed, a metallic sigh against the night's indifference. He approached via the mirror's fractured reality, a marionette whose puppeteer had nodded off, all angles and lurches. Tall, skeletal beneath a flimsy jacket that offered no concession to the balmy night. His face, a topography of hollows and sharp ridges carved by shadow. "Destination?" I ventured, voice rough as rust. His reply slipped out, smooth and cold as river stone. "Same as yours." Every nerve ending shrieked, "Drive." Yet some vestige of foolish humanity, some ingrained courtesy perhaps, made me reach across and flip the lock. He folded himself into the passenger seat, a collection of disjointed limbs arranging themselves with an unsettling lack of grace. The air thickened instantly with the scent of freshly turned soil and a faint, coppery tang I couldn't quite identify. I pulled back onto the ribbon of road, breathing shallowly. "Silas," I offered, the name sounding alien in the charged silence. He regarded me with eyes like chipped obsidian, reflecting the dashboard lights without warmth. A pause stretched thin, taut. "Abel. Just Abel. Of course. Rule of the road. Don't pry into the shadows people carry." We rolled on, the diesel's thrum a low heartbeat against the vast emptiness. Insects spattered the windshield like tiny fleeting stars against a black canvas. My eyes kept snagging on him, this passenger swathed in stillness. He possessed an unnatural rigidity, a composure so absolute it suggested his form was merely borrowed, ill-fitting. "So, Abel," I began, the quiet pressing in, becoming unbearable, "where'd the road spit you out from?" He didn't turn, his voice drifting as if from a great distance, detached. From a city bleached by perpetual daylight, where the thoroughfares are cobbled with femurs. A dry laugh scraped my throat. Sounds festive. Reno, maybe? No answer in humor registered on that gaunt face. Only those vacant eyes swiveled towards me, ancient and knowing. "You cannot conceive," he whispered, the sound barely disturbing the air. A sudden chill permeated the cabin, deep and invasive, unrelated to the night air. I nudged the heater, a futile gesture against the creeping cold that emanated from him. Outside, the familiar desert landscape warped, shadows pooling like ink spills at the edge of the light's reach, the known world becoming alien. Abel's presence felt like a vacuum, leaching color and heat, intimacy and safety from the small space we shared. Just as I considered suggesting the false sanctuary of the next flickering truck stop sign, Abel spoke again, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush that raised the hairs on my neck. "Silas, do you entertain the notion of monsters?" The question landed like ice on my bare skin. "Not particularly," I managed, my voice tighter than I intended, betraying the sudden lurch in my gut. He fixed me with that dead reckoning stare. "You will." My knuckles whitened on the wheel. "Listen, friend, I don't know your game, but..." The word died, because Abel dissolved. His skin shimmered, undulating as if unseen vermin moved beneath it. His facial structure buckled, melting and reshaping into contours utterly alien, angles sharpening, mouth widening impossibly. I watched, paralyzed by disbelief, frozen into horror, as his fingers stretched, elongating into obsidian talons that shredded the cheap fabric of his gloves like wet paper. My foot crushed the brake pedal. The rig screamed, fishtailing across the desolate tarmac in a plume of burnt rubber and panic. My hand scrabbled for the door latch, clumsy with terror. But the thing beside me moved with impossible, blurring speed. A clawed appendage clamped onto my forearm, a grip of glacial strength and chilling intent that seemed to leach the very marrow from my bones. A raw sound tore from my throat. Fear, agony, disbelief mingling into one ragged cry. "Leaving so soon, Silas?" It rasped, the voice a nightmarish echo of Abel's gravelly tones, layered now with something ancient and guttural, resonant with malice. "The overture is barely finished." Blind panic fueled a wild swing. My fist met something yielding yet dense, like striking cold, damp clay. A shriek split the night, inhuman and serrated, a sound that promised agony. The pressure on my arm eased fractionally. Enough. I flung the door open and hurled myself into the unforgiving embrace of the asphalt. Fire lanced through my shoulder as I hit, but raw adrenaline surged, eclipsing the pain. I scrambled upright, legs pumping, fleeing into the oppressive dark without a backward glance, the sound of my own ragged breathing loud in my ears. The shriek of tortured metal ripped through the silence, followed by a roar that vibrated in my teeth, seeming to shake the very ground. Against all reason, against every instinct screaming for self-preservation, I risked a look back over my shoulder, my heart seized, stuttering in my chest. The creature, the thing that wore Abel's skin only moments before, had peeled back the cab's roof as if it were foil. It loomed against the indifferent starlight, a grotesque silhouette eclipsing the truck. Part chitin, part shadow. Its form a blasphemous fusion of impossible angles and nightmare curves. Eyes like embers burned in a face that was a rictus of fangs. I ran, fueled by primal terror, air searing my lungs like acid. Behind me, the thud of immense footfalls resonated through the pavement, heavy, deliberate. It wasn't chasing, not truly. It was herding, I realized with a fresh wave of cold dread. It was enjoying the sport. Just as my muscles screamed for surrender, threatening to buckle, a distant glimmer pierced the gloom, the fluorescent halo of a roadside oasis, a gas station, a tiny island of light in an ocean of terror. Hope, sharp and desperate, spurred me onward, demanding one last, agonizing burst of speed. Abruptly, the pursuing rhythm ceased. Another terrified glance. The shape was receding, folding back into the roadside darkness, shrinking, disturbingly, towards the human dimensions before vanishing entirely into the impenetrable black. I crashed into the pool of light surrounding the gas pumps, breath tearing through me in ragged sobs that shook my whole frame. Inside, behind the counter, A lone attendant glanced up from a worn paperback, his eyes widening at the wreck I presented. Torn clothing, bleeding arm, face etched with sheer horror. "Hey, buddy, you all right?" His hand hovered near a phone on the wall. Words failed me. I managed only a weak shake of the head before my legs gave way, depositing me onto the cool, cracked linoleum floor. As he dialed, my gaze remained fixed on the highway, searching the absolute blackness beyond the light's edge, half expecting to see twin points of malevolent light watching, waiting. The flashing blues and reds arrived soon after, slicing through the night. They found the rig parked askew on the highway, violated and empty, its cab ripped open to the stars like a crushed can. No trace of Abel, of course. My frantic, fragmented narrative was met with patient disbelief. Fatigue, they suggested gently, maybe tainted coffee from some forgotten diner. Hallucinations born of the endless, lonely road. Yet they had no neat explanation for the deep, parallel gouges on my arm that mirrored no known animal's claws, nor for the unsettlingly large, non-human prints pressed into the dust around the crippled truck. I surrendered my commercial license soon after that night. The open road, once a harsh solace, now felt like a gaping maw, promising only darkness in the memory of those eyes. Sleep offers little refuge. Often I wake gasping, drenched in cold sweat, the phantom glow of those embers seared behind my own eyelids, the distorted rasp of its voice echoing in the quiet room. What Abel was, from what abyss he crawled, remains a question mark branded onto my psyche. I know only this. The dark spaces between towns, the long stretches of deserted highway, hold more than just distance and silence. Sometimes they hold teeth. Sometimes they need a lift. So, heed this. Should you find yourself devoured by the highway's lonely miles, navigating by dashboard light alone, see that solitary silhouette, that beckoning thumb piercing the darkness like a bone shard? Keep rolling. Press down on the accelerator until the memory of it is lost in your rearview mirror. Because the passenger you invite across your threshold might be something you can never ask to leave. Me? I cling to the sunlit hours now. I find comfort in crowds, in noise, in light. And the passenger seat stays empty. Always. Some journeys exact too high a toll. Never had I imagined a simple photographic detour could curdle my insides, nor that a slice of quiet earth could summon tremors in me with the coming of night. And certainly, the notion of a forgotten well forcing me to distrust my own eyes was beyond reckoning. Yet precisely this unfolded 2 days past, when I paused at that forsaken plot dominated by a well shrouded in moss. What I witnessed, what assailed my ears, the sensations that clawed at me, I intend to lay it bare. No embellishments, no narrative flourish. This is the unvarnished sequence, moment by painstaking moment, from my arrival to this very instant. I navigated a serpentine back road, immersed in a hunt for landscape tinged with the peculiar for a personal collection. My camera occupied the passenger seat, spare batteries nestled in a canvas sack at my feet, a thermos of cooling coffee beside them. The asphalt ribbon stretched vacant. No homesteads, no weathered barns, not a flicker of human presence for untold miles. Then, a diminutive wooden placard, its paint cracked to reveal the name Mordant Glade, materialized. I eased the car onto the shoulder. A dirt track, barely more than a suggestion, vanished into a thicket of towering, skeletal trees. With the sun bleeding gold behind me, I suspected the fading light might lend the locale a certain compelling quality. Near a fence whose timbers sagged with ancient weariness, likely hollowed by unseen colonies, I parked. It encircled a sprawling field. Far off, a small dwelling, a stable leaning precariously, and a vast, untamed garden stood sentinel. Waist-high grasses choked the garden space. Weeds wove intricate nets around crumbling stone foundations. A colossal oak listed dramatically near the stable, its posture one of slow surrender. The sole audible presence was the thrumming drone of insects. No breeze stirred the leaves. No birdsong punctured the stillness. I swung a leg over the decaying fence, settled the camera strap around my neck, and advanced. The air hung heavy, damp, saturated with the aroma of sodden earth and decomposing wood. With each step, my boots surrendered to the mud's soft grasp. Before the stable, my gaze snagged on an old well. Circular, fashioned from massive, irregular stones, its rim was upholstered in vibrant green moss. A fractured pulley mechanism dangled above it, its rope snapped, lying coiled like a dead serpent on the damp ground. Something visceral insisted this well-held photographic promise. Sunlight struck it obliquely, sculpting shadows that amplified its eerie charm. Lifting my camera, I fine-tuned the focus, capturing the well from shifting perspectives. Then, drawn closer, I sought an intimate frame of the moss itself. The stones felt slick beneath the verdant growth. The moss yielded slipperily to my exploring fingers. I leaned across the well's stone lip, peering into its depths. Utter blackness greeted me. A chill current of air breathed upward, carrying the scent of stagnant water. I held my position, motionless. That's when the sound reached me. A whisper, faint as an exhale through clenched teeth. Initially, I dismissed it. Wind sighing through crevices in the stonework, perhaps, but no draft touched my skin. And then, unmistakable, woven into that soft sibilance, I swear I heard my name uttered once. A sickening lurch occurred deep in my gut. I recoiled sharply, the camera nearly slipping from my grasp. Straining my ears, I found only silence had returned. A frantic scan revealed emptiness. Confusion washed over me. My phone confirmed my isolation. 0 bars. It had to be the wind, I reasoned, an acoustic trick of the well's cavity. Yet I craved certainty. The impulse led me to record. Switching the camera to video mode, I leaned forward again, extending my arm, pointing the lens down into the inscrutable dark. My objective, to capture any sound emanating from below. I held the camera steady, suppressing my own breath, my arms beginning to quiver, shoulders rigid with tension. A prickling cold traced the nape of my neck. After perhaps a minute, judging the duration sufficient, I began to retract the camera. But just before the lens cleared the well's shadowed mouth, a reflection flashed across its surface. Swift, ephemeral. It resolved into a face, but starkly not my own. I glimpsed the configuration of eyes alien to my features, a mouth agape as if in a silent gasp. With a jolt, I yanked the camera back, fumbling it again. My hands shook violently. I killed the recording, fighting to regulate my ragged breathing, my heart hammering against my ribs. Glancing at the small screen, anticipating a glitch, an anomaly of light. It flickered once, then plunged into darkness. Turning the camera over to inspect the lens, I froze. Its surface was marred by scratches originating from within. The exterior glass remained smooth, untouched. These were jagged, deep gouges scoring the internal elements, as if something had meticulously carved the glass from the inside out. Disbelief warred with nausea. I scrutinized it under the failing light. No external cracks. The damage was definitively internal, the marks spiraling inward, a chaotic lattice etched by some minuscule, savage implement. My thoughts scattered. It defied logic. A wave of sickness rose. I spun around, surveying the desolate surroundings once more. Empty. Then, from the well, a wet, shifting noise, like something heavy displacing water. I flinched. Clutching the camera tightly, I turned from the well, my muscles coiled springs. My retreat towards the car was punctuated by nervous backward glances. The well remained silent. The stable, derelict. The distant house stared back with boarded-up eyes. My intention was immediate departure, but as I reached the car, the sun had nearly relinquished the sky. My exploration had consumed more time than I'd realized. Near the stable, another small sign, previously unnoticed or perhaps dismissed, advertised loggia. The gable end, hand-painted in stark letters. Perhaps I'd overlooked it near the road sign for Mordant Glade. I climbed into the driver's seat and drove onward, perhaps another mile. The farmhouse materialized, matching the sign's promise. A tall man, his boots caked in mud, met me at the door. He confirmed a vacancy, his manner incurious. I paid in cash. He handed me a key. The well remained my secret. Explaining felt futile, bordering on madness. Inside, I carried my gear into the offered room. A musty odor permeated the air, but exhaustion trumped fastidiousness. I locked the door, shed my mud-caked boots, and sank onto the edge of the bed. My jeans felt clammy. My back protested the day's exertions. Once more, I attempted to coax life from my camera, hoping to review the footage. Utterly unresponsive. The battery indicator had shown ample charge. Plugging it into the wall yielded nothing. The small power light remained stubbornly dark. Frustration tightened my chest. The camera represented a significant investment. Driven now by a need to understand the damage, I carefully unscrewed the lens. The rear element bore scratches too, mirroring the front. The pattern held no discernible logic, just jagged lines intersecting in a rough, inward spiral. Running a soft cloth over them confirmed their internal nature, unreachable. I set the ruined equipment aside, forcing myself to breathe deeply. A glance at the wall clock showed it nearing 9. Faintly, I heard the proprietor moving about outside. The sounds of rural routine, feeding animals, securing latches. Rubbing my weary eyes, I pushed open the window, seeking fresh air. The darkness outside was profound, pierced only by a solitary distant light, perhaps the stable or a neighbor's porch. The air carried the premonition of rain. A shower in the cramped attached bathroom offered little solace. Water pressure fluctuated, the heat unreliable. As I rinsed my hair, hands still unsteady, the image of that distorted face resurfaced. Those alien eyes, the gaping mouth. It felt intrinsically wrong. Remembering the whisper tightened my throat. Clean clothes on, I sat at a small scarred desk, making one last futile attempt to clean the lens. Then, a soft noise from beyond the window, Almost a drip, but heavier, more viscous, followed by a faint scraping like damp rubber dragged across wood. My jaw locked. Moving to the window, I peered into the gloom. Nothing immediately visible. Then the sound repeated, closer now, along the wall to my right. A slimy, slithering cadence. Something was ascending the house's exterior. Keeping the room lights off to preserve my night vision, I pressed my face closer to the cool glass. As my eyes adapted, a shape resolved against the siding near the roofline. A long, dark smear, several feet across, clinging tenaciously. My breath hitched. The shape seemed to ripple at its edges. A glistening trail marked its path upward, catching the faint moonlight like the track of some colossal slug. Featureless, limbless, just a mass of animate darkness hauling itself skyward. I recoiled from the window, my throat parched, heart thudding erratically. I checked the door lock again, a useless gesture against such amorphous dread. My phone remained inert, a dead weight. I activated its flashlight app, aiming it at the window, but the glare only reflected my own fear. Opening the window felt unthinkable. I stood frozen, listening. Seconds stretched. A scrape sounded from the roof above, then a soft, heavy thump, as if something substantial settled onto the shingles. I swallowed against a rising tightness. The urge to cry out for the proprietor warred with the fear of drawing attention. My legs felt unreliable. Renewed sweat prickled my skin despite the room's chill. Decision made, I crept to the door, easing it open. The hallway stretched dark, dimly lit by a lamp at its far end. Floorboards groaned beneath my cautious weight. I moved toward the main living area, straining to hear any further sound from the roof. Silence, for now. The front door was bolted, windows secured. Peering through a front window revealed only a parked truck and shadowed trees. No movement, no anomalous shapes. Standing there, chest constricted, I heard the proprietor's voice from another room, humming softly, perhaps in the kitchen. Drawn by the sound of normalcy, I found him there. He nodded, inquiring if all was well. Avoiding the brand of lunatic, I merely asked about large climbing animals common to the area. He regarded me with mild confusion, shaking his head. Perhaps a stray cat, he offered, or a determined raccoon, but nothing of significant size. I nodded my thanks and retreated to my room. Back within its dubious safety, I scanned the walls, the ceiling. No damp patches, no dripping residue. The window remained closed, curtains drawn. Flicking on the overhead light, its stark brightness offered a sliver of comfort. I lingered by the window, listening intently. Absolute quiet. No scraping, no whispers. Exhaling slowly, I tried to regain composure. Perhaps exhaustion had conjured the shape, but the well, the face, the impossible scratches inside my camera lens, these were harder to dismiss. One final check outside, I decided, before attempting sleep. Flashlight in hand, I took a fortifying breath and opened the bedroom door. The hallway remained unchanged. I navigated to the back door, unlatched it, and stepped onto the porch. The night air met me, cool and smelling of damp grass. I swept the flashlight beam across the farmhouse walls. Nothing. I angled it upward, towards the roof. Still nothing. Circling to the side of the building where I'd seen the shape, my light found the siding. Thin streaks of something dark and viscous marred the wood, trailing upward towards the roofline. My stomach plummeted. The streaks looked disturbingly fresh. Droplets still clung, glistening wetly. Hesitantly, I reached out, touching one with a fingertip. It felt thick, unnaturally cold, and carried a faint, stale odor. Revulsion crawled over my skin. Wiping my finger on my jeans, I stepped back, a knot of ice forming in my gut. The urge to shout for the owner surged again, but died unspoken. Taking another tentative step, I tried to follow the streak's trajectory onto the roof, but the angle defeated the flashlight beam. My imagination ignited, populating the unseen rooftop with horrors. A flicker of movement in my peripheral vision sent the flashlight beam swinging wildly. Nothing. My pulse hammered in my ears. A mosquito whined near my face, and the sudden swat nearly sent the flashlight tumbling. Enough. Retreating inside, I bolted the back door and hurried back to my room. There, I wedged the desk chair firmly beneath the doorknob. Then, I sat on the bed, back pressed against the headboard, clutching my camera bag like a shield. Relaxation was impossible. My mind replayed the sequence by the well relentlessly. The reflected visage, the sound of scraping, the lens violated from within. And now, this cold, wet presence clinging to the farmhouse walls. Sleep offered no refuge. Every creak, every distant drip morphed into scraping, slithering sounds just outside my door. I finally drifted into an uneasy doze around 4 a.m. Sunlight piercing the curtain gaps roused me. I rose slowly, my body aching with residual tension. A cautious peek outside confirmed the streaks remained, now dried into dark, ugly lines against the siding. I packed with frantic speed, consumed by the need to escape. Settling my bill with the proprietor, I offered no explanation, no mention of the streaks or my ruined camera. Departure was the only imperative. As I pulled away, a final glance at the farmhouse fixed the image in my mind. Those dark lines scarring the wall, evidence of something that had climbed to the roof and simply vanished. Now, hours later, putting miles between myself and that place, the camera remained stubbornly inert. I tried again at a roadside stop, nothing. The scratches endure, tiny claw-like signatures on the inner glass. The face in the well haunts my thoughts. I felt its gaze, impossibly, staring back from the dark water. It was not my reflection. I've recounted this precisely as it occurred, stripped of artistry or analysis. Logic offers no foothold here. I possess only the raw data of my senses, the chilling weight of my fear. My plan is the city, a camera repair shop, perhaps a new lens. But the simple act of leaning over a well, especially in some isolated corner of the world, now feels fraught with peril. And when I close my eyes, the image surfaces, a slow, wet shape inching its way up a silent house, leaving cold trails in its wake. The inability to forget, the impossibility of proof, these are the souvenirs I carry. But I saw it, I heard it, and the scars inside my camera lens remain. Let me be clear. This isn't embellishment. This is the bone-chilling reality of what found me on that ribbon of asphalt. Years I've ridden. The solitary thrum of the engine my only companion. The quiet solitude a balm. But one night, the road offered something else, something inexplicable and hostile. The hour hovered near 3 a.m. I'd been chasing the horizon for hours down a seldom-traveled back road, a vein of tarmac I'd never witnessed busy, not even under the midday sun. I registered the cold first, a biting chill seizing my neck, creeping along my arms despite the leather. Stillness reigned. No breeze stirred the night. My headlamp carved a lonely tunnel through absolute blackness, miles from any sign of dwelling or commerce. Then, ahead, a sudden rampart of vapor loomed, opaque and stark white against the dark. Instinctively, I eased off the throttle, visibility vanishing into the looming barrier. Plunging into it was like entering another element. Dampness instantly saturated my jacket, a million microscopic droplets clinging, blurring my visor. My high beams, useless, threw back a blinding diffusion, forcing me to switch to low. Beneath my tires, the asphalt turned slick, treacherous. A knot tightened low in my belly. Fog alone rarely unnerved me, but this was no ordinary patch. It possessed a peculiar density, swallowing the meager light from my bike, reducing my world to shifting shades of gray mere feet from my face. Then the engine sputtered. A harsh cough, a tremor vibrating up through the handlebars into my grip. Water in the lines, perhaps? A minor gremlin? But the sputtering persisted, grew ragged. My machine, ever dependable, sounded like it was choking. A glance at the console showed nothing amiss, yet the engine stuttered, faltered, threatened to stall. And then it did. Silence crashed down as the console lights winked out. Raw fear, cold and sharp, pierced through me. I thumbed the starter. A click, a pathetic whir, then nothing. My pulse hammered a frantic rhythm against my temples. Kickstand down, boots meeting the sodden pavement. A shiver traced my spine, unrelated to the cold. Logic dictated waiting for morning, for the fog to perhaps dissipate. But this mist felt wrong, heavy, like a physical pressure against my skin. I decided movement was better than stasis, wrestling the bike toward the shoulder. The machine felt leaden in my grasp. The fog crowded close, a suffocating gray shroud limiting sight to arm's length. My own breathing sounded unnaturally loud, each exhalation a plume dissolving into the greater miasma. Bike secured, ignition off, then on again. A hopeful flicker on the console, instantly extinguished. The engine remained dead. A soft dragging noise scraped the silence behind me, like a foot being scuffed hesitantly across the asphalt. I spun, eyes straining into the impenetrable gray. Shapes shifted, indistinct, formless. My heart leaped. "Hello?" I called out, my voice swallowed almost immediately, though a faint echo returned. "Anyone there?" Silence answered, followed by a low murmur, unintelligible, unsettlingly close. Gooseflesh prickled my arms. Beneath my jacket, despite the chill, sweat began to bead. An animal, I told myself, a scavenging creature. But the cadence felt disturbingly human. My hand fumbled in my pocket, closing around a small flashlight. Its beam sliced a weak path a few paces into the mist, revealing nothing substantial. Yet the dragon sound continued, seeming to circle me now, always just beyond the light's reach. "Who's out there?" I demanded, louder this time. Again, no reply, only another shuffling step and a whisper that seemed to emanate from directly behind me. I whirled around, empty gray. A vice tightened around my chest, stealing my breath, making each inhalation shallow, sharp. My thoughts scattered. Abandon the bike? Walk? But where? The last town was an eternity back, 30 miles at least, and the road ahead offered no promise. Nearly 3:15, my watch confirmed. Dawn was a distant hope. Decision made. Push the bike, walk it until I found something. Shelter. A break in this cursed fog. Perhaps the engine might miraculously revive. Gripping the handlebars, I began the slow, arduous trek. The uneven asphalt threatened my footing. Step by painstaking step, the fog seemed to thicken, consolidating its hold. My flashlight beam grew diffuse, reflecting back, nearly blinding. More footsteps now, faint, intermittent, sometimes sounding like several sets, keeping pace in the periphery. And the muttering returned, a low, susurrus-like hushed, urgent conversation. The words forever elusive. Every nerve screamed. Each forward step felt heavier than the last. Perhaps 10 minutes into this grueling effort, the bike's headlamp flickered erratically. A brief, weak pulse of light illuminated the road ahead. Hope surged. I tried the starter again. Futile. The light died completely. A frustrated sigh escaped me, misting in the damp air. Keep pushing. Ahead, slightly to the side, a faint luminescence suggested a small clearing, a pocket where the fog seemed less absolute. I angled the heavy bike towards it, muscles burning, boots slipping on the slick surface, hands numb. Reaching the patch of gravel, I parked the bike again, desperate for a moment's respite, a clearer view. The fog swirled at the edges of this small haven, but visibility improved marginally. That's when movement snagged my attention, off to the left. A vague silhouette, man-sized, utterly still. I snapped the flashlight beam towards it. Nothing. Just swirling gray. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, flicked the light off, then on. Still nothing. My throat felt like sandpaper. A dry swallow brought no relief. Then, distinctly, labored breathing close behind me. I spun around, flashlight sweeping the empty clearing. I paced a tight circle, scanning frantically. The breathing intensified for a heartbeat, then vanished as if switched off. My heart hammered against my ribs. A high-pitched ringing filled my ears. The muscles in my neck corded tight. Watched. I was being watched. Forward again. No choice. But as I moved, the fog retaliated, thickening, swirling disorientingly, threatening to erase the road itself. I fumbled for a rag, wiped my visor clear, only for the moisture to instantly return. The humidity was stifling now, sweat trickling down my forehead despite a perceived drop in temperature. Each breath rasped in my throat. My legs felt stiff, robotic. Glancing up from the handlebars, I caught fleeting impressions at the edge of vision. Once, a pale face, hideously distorted, skin stretched taut over unseen bones. A mere blink, and the fog reclaimed it. The tightness in my chest returned. A shaky breath escaped my lips. My hands trembled. Exhaustion, I reasoned, tricks of the eye. But the primal fear gnawing at my core refused to be placated. A wet, slithering scrape sounded to my right, lasted seconds, then ceased. I jerked my head that way, flashlight beam cut an empty space. The sound repeated, now on my left. The fine hairs on my nape prickled. Nausea churned in my gut. Ignore it. Keep moving. But the sound persisted, closing in, retreating, switching sides like a predator testing defenses. My knuckles whitened, gripping the handlebars until they ached. Somehow, I covered more ground. Time warped in the gray void. My watch mocked me, minutes stretching into eternities. I reached another small area where the fog seemed momentarily less dense, revealing a large crack snaking across the asphalt, filled with pooled rainwater. My flashlight beam reflected dimly in the dark water, and in that reflection, a figure, tall, indistinct, standing just behind me. I whirled, light stabbing the space it should have occupied, empty. I checked the puddle again. The reflection was gone. My chest felt ready to implode. The noises escalated. Whispers grew louder, almost coalescing into words but never quite resolving, shifting from hushed argument to low, mournful groans. Step followed laborious step. My boots squelched. My jacket felt impossibly heavy. Breath fogged my visor relentlessly. I flipped it up, welcoming the cold shock of air on my face. A glance down the road, another fleeting horror. A twisted visage, eyes like burnt-out sockets, mouth agape in a silent scream. I aimed the light. It dissolved. My heart pounded violently. My body shuddered. Curses muttered under my breath, small sounds lost in the vast grayness. The urge to abandon the bike, to run blindly into the fog, was overwhelming. But run where? Cell service was non-existent. I'd checked earlier, finding only mocking emptiness where signal bars should be. Push forward or turn back. The thought of retreat sent a fresh wave of dread through me. The fog behind seemed darker, more impenetrable, a palpable pressure against my back warning me away. Onward, then. Escape was the only imperative. Boots splashed through unseen puddles, soaking my jeans. My arms screamed fatigue. Up ahead, to the right, a faint glow, different from my flashlight. Weak, yellowish. Hope flickered anew. I strained toward it, step by painful step. As I drew nearer, the light sputtered and vanished. A trick of the mist? Then, from that exact spot, a loud, decisive shuffle. I froze, aiming the flashlight. Gray haze mocked me. Pulse frantic, palms slick, breath coming in ragged gasps. "Leave me alone," I whispered, unsure if I addressed man or specter. No trouble here. Only the distant, sibilant murmuring answered. A few more steps. Peripheral movement again. Something tall. A roadside tree? I swept the light. No trees, only the swirling, morphing shapes within the mist. One seemed to coalesce briefly into a featureless head before dissolving back into the chaos. My eyes burned from the strain. Nausea surged. A tremor started in my leg. My chest felt hollowed out. Get out. Just get out. One last desperate try at the ignition. Key turned. Console lights flickered weakly, died. I kicked the pedal starter in sheer frustration, the metallic clang echoing unnaturally loud. The whispers abruptly ceased, as if startled. Then they resumed, faster, more urgent. Focus, practicalities. My watch read 4 a.m., an hour trapped in this nightmare, an hour that felt like a lifetime. Waiting for dawn felt impossible. Push on. The fog must break eventually. Numb arms, aching back, I forced myself onward. The footsteps returned, closer now, sometimes seeming to match my pace, always just beyond sight. My flashlight beam weakened noticeably, dimming. Batteries dying. I tapped it frantically. It flickered, pulsed weakly. My stomach plummeted. Without light. Suddenly, my foot plunged into a deep pothole. I stumbled, nearly losing my grip on the bike, wrenching my ankle. Pain, white hot, shot up my leg. I managed to right the bike, get the kickstand down, leaning heavily against the machine, gasping for breath. My ankle throbbed fiercely. Every muscle screamed tension. The fog pressed in, a damp, suffocating shroud, utter isolation, the last man on Earth. Seconds later, a low groan emanated from my left. Movement flickered at the edge of my vision. Head snapped around, light probing the impenetrable gray. Only my own ragged breathing echoed back. Scalp tingled. A shape seemed to detach itself from the mist, gliding closer. I thrust the dying flashlight forward. "Stay back," I yelled, voice cracking. A faint, dry hiss answered, chilling me to the bone. The shape appeared to withdraw. Delay was death. Gritting my teeth against the agony, I seized the handlebars and limped forward, pushing through the pain. Each step was torture. Sweat mingled with mist on my face. Breathing became shallow panting. Thought narrowed to a single point: endure, advance. The road began to curve. I followed its bend, praying for reprieve, and then blessed relief. Ahead, the fog visibly thinned. Tree silhouettes emerged, stark against a slightly less oppressive darkness. The road ahead opened, my fading flashlight beam reaching further. Ignoring the fire in my ankle, I pushed harder, the bike suddenly feeling lighter. The menacing shapes receded. The murmurs faded into silence. A few more yards, and I broke free into relative clarity. I could see perhaps 100 feet ahead. The sky overhead held the faintest promise of pre-dawn light. No figures, no watchers, just the empty road and the receding wall of fog. One more turn of the key. A cough, a sputter. Then, unbelievably, the engine roared to life. A strangled laugh escaped me, half sob, half exultation. I swung my leg over, ignoring the screaming protest from my ankle, twisted the throttle. The engine caught, held steady. Behind me, the fog churned, a solid, malevolent mass clinging to the asphalt. I didn't look back again. Head pounding, eyes watering from the sudden rush of cold air, I accelerated, putting distance between myself and that gray horror. Minutes later, the fog bank was a bad memory receding in my mirrors. The sky lightened further, revealing the familiar, mundane world. I risked one glance over my shoulder. The fog remained, a thick, unmoving barrier stretched across the road. Then I faced forward, focusing only on the ribbon of asphalt unfurling before me. My heart still hammered. My hands trembled. But I rode on. What lurked within that fog, I cannot say. No tidy explanation presents itself. The faces remained indistinct, the voices never resolved into sense, but the sounds, the oppressive presence, the chilling glimpses, those were undeniably real. Something in that mist was sentient, and it was hostile. Luck, timing, sheer will, whatever facilitated my escape, I grasp it tightly. That stretch of road is now forbidden territory in my mind. That's the unvarnished truth of it. The scrape of boots on wet pavement, the low hiss from the gray depths, these sensory ghosts linger. A cold knot still forms in my stomach at the memory. I seek neither sympathy nor belief. I simply needed to expel this account, to not carry its weight alone. Should you ever find yourself facing such a wall of fog on a lonely road in the dead of night, perhaps you'll pause. Perhaps you'll turn back. God knows I would. My boot soles ceased their rhythmic crushing of fallen foliage. Stillness descended, absolute, save for the sudden chill that spiderwebbed through my veins. There, imprinted deep within the loamy earth of the clearing I'd claimed mere hours before, lay tracks, stark, fresh, and unequivocally not my own. Someone, perhaps something, had visited my brief sanctuary while I was away, and the profound quiet now gripping the forest suggested they hadn't necessarily departed. Solitude had always been my siren song, the wilderness my cathedral. I thrived on the unmediated dialogue with nature, the quiet hum of self-reliance resonating deep within me. Thus, a liberated week beckoned me towards the venerable spine of the Appalachians, not merely to tread familiar paths, but to delve, to push into the whispering, untrammeled heart of the backcountry. 2 days dissolved in sun-dappled tranquility, the air sharp with pine resin and the sweet decay of autumn. My boots devoured miles. By the third sun's traverse, the beaten path was a memory. The world had shrunk to ancient trees and the murmur of my own passage. Then, as twilight painted the ridges in hues of ember and violet, I found it. A sanctuary nestled beside a chattering brook, walled by sentinel pines. Tent pitched, wood gathered, the promise of a hot meal warming me. Only then did I recall the water filter, resting streamside. A trivial oversight, a 5-minute errand, nothing more. Returning, however, shattered that fragile peace. A dissonance resonated before sight confirmed it, an instinctual prickle, cold fingers tracing my nape, then the visual confirmation. Prints. Gargantuan impressions disturbing the soft earth encircling my small haven. Not there moments ago. I halted at the clearing's edge, breath caught, eyes scanning the darkening woods, now transformed into a tapestry of lumined shapes and watchful shadows. The forest's familiar symphony silenced, replaced by the frantic drumming within my own chest. With tentative steps, I breached the clearing. The tent stood, seemingly untouched, but my pack, always secured within the fly sheet, rested just outside, its zipper parted like a leering grin. Trembling fingers completed the unzipping. A hollow void greeted me. Every morsel, every painstakingly prepared ration, the very fuel for my journey, gone, vanished. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the initial shock. 2 days trek minimum to any semblance of civilization. Foodless. Yet, dwarfing that practical terror was the chilling certainty. The thief might linger. My fingers instinctively sought my phone, a useless brick in this deep wilderness. The emergency beacon felt like overkill, didn't it? No injury, just raw, unadulterated fear. As true night bled into the woods, the choice loomed starkly. Brave the black, pathless unknown now, or endure the vigil, knowing something shared this space. Ultimately, the terror of the unseen forest after dark eclipsed the dread of the known, yet unseen, visitor. I would stay. Sleep, however, felt like a distant country. I fed the flames obsessively, coaxing a defiant circle of light against the encroaching immensity of darkness. It felt fragile, a tiny island in a black ocean, each skittering leaf, each twig's sharp retort sent jolts through my system. My sheath knife lay heavy in my hand, a cold, inadequate comfort. My mind, untethered, conjured phantoms. A bear of unusual cunning, a fellow traveler driven to desperation, or something other. Sleep must have claimed me, raggedly, for I surfaced with a gasp, adrift in disorientation. Embers pulsed weakly, the world beyond was utter black. Then, the sound that solidified the fear. Footfalls. Measured, deliberate, tracing the perimeter of my fragile light. I scrambled upright, my heart a frantic prisoner against my ribs. My flashlight slipped from nerveless fingers, clattering uselessly. The steps ceased. Hello? The word emerged a pathetic tremor. Is anyone there? An unnatural quiet descended, swallowing the night sounds, the very breath of the woods. From the darkness, just beyond the dying glow, a voice rasped, rough as granite. You shouldn't be here. I spun, desperate to locate the source. Who are you? I demanded, trying to inject steel into my quavering voice. What is it you want? A dry rustle, like dead leaves stirred by wind, a chuckle devoid of warmth. Want? Your absence. This forest answers to me. You intrude. My apologies, I stammered, hating the weakness. No offense intended. I'll be gone at first light, I promise. Another arid chuckle, nearer now. A disturbance in the shadows coalesced. Something stepped into the ember glow, something that mocked the human form. Tall, impossibly so, and thin to the point of emaciation. Wrong. Skewed geometry. Arms dangled, unnaturally long, past its knees. A wide-brimmed hat cast the face in impenetrable shadow, yet twin points of reflected light gleamed from within. What are you? The question escaped as a whisper. It tilted its head, a sharp, clicking motion. I am the sentinel, the warden, that which dissuades trespassers like yourself. It advanced. I recoiled, catching my heel on a root, sprawling onto the damp earth. Scrabbling backward, I pleaded, Please, I understand. I'll leave. Just let me gather my things. It paused, seeming to ponder this. No, departure is immediate. Your possessions are forfeit. Rent for your intrusion. A cold certainty settled over me. Negotiation was not an option. Rising on legs that felt like brittle sticks, I managed, All right, which way leads out? A hand lifted, fingers impossibly elongated, skeletal, pointing into the black maw of the trees. There, 2 miles straight. Maintain your pace. Do not turn. Do not return. I gave a jerky nod, too paralyzed by terror for speech, and stumbled forward in the indicated direction. Every cell screamed, Run, but a deeper instinct warned against it. Time dissolved into a sequence of stumbles, falls, and relentless forward motion through suffocating darkness. My hands grew raw, knees bled onto my trousers. Still, I pushed onward, propelled by primal fear, obeying the injunction. Don't look back. Just as exhaustion threatened to buckle my legs completely, a faint ribbon of lighter ground appeared ahead, the main trail. Relief washed over me, hot and stinging like tears. The moment my boots found the compacted earth, instinct took over. I fled. Ran with the ragged gasps of a hunted animal, lungs searing, vision blurring, until the blessed geometry of a trail marker, then the stark expanse of the hiker's lot, materialized from the gloom. A lone pickup truck rested there, beside which stood an older gentleman, likely readying for a dawn hike. He registered my appearance, wild-eyed, smeared with dirt and blood, clad only in thin layers against the pre-dawn chill, and his own eyes widened. Merciful heavens, son, what in God's name happened to you? My mouth worked, but the story lodged itself somewhere between terror and disbelief. How could I articulate the night's grotesque visitation? Lost, I finally rasped. Walked all night. He offered a sympathetic nod, though skepticism flickered in his gaze. Right then, Best get you checked out. As the truck pulled away, casting the forest back into shadow, I risked a glance. Was it a trick of the light, or did a tall, slender silhouette stand sentinel at the tree line, observing our retreat? Those woods remain untrodden by my feet. Solo journeys are relics of a former self. Sleep is sometimes fractured by cold dread, the echo of that gravel voice. This forest answers to me, a phantom limb of memory. What did I encounter? A figment born of exhaustion and fear? A forgotten legend given flesh? Or something truly other, native to the deep, unmapped places? I hold no answers, only the disquieting awareness that occasionally, gazing towards the familiar woods bordering my own home, my periphery catches a flicker of movement, something elongated, unnaturally slender, vanishing between the trees. It serves as a stark reminder. There are domains where humanity is merely tolerated, if not actively unwelcome, where the wild retains its ancient sovereignty, its teeth sharp. On those knots, I draw the curtains tighter, check the locks, and wrestle with the knowledge that some frontiers are best left undisturbed.